Eric. No, I'm just kidding. Eric's actually not here. Just me today. Haven't really put anything out in a while. We kind of have a video stuck in production limbo that should be on its way relatively soon. But I kind of wanted to get something out there. And I just saw a movie for the first time in theaters in a couple months. So thought I'd talk about that briefly and just kind of give you guys something to say. I hope everyone's doing well. So in any case, I just saw Tenet in theaters. I think this is the first movie I've seen since like Invisible Man or like Fantasy Island or one of those really stupid movies that came out right before, the thing. But anyway, what I thought was that it was a movie. And it was a Christopher Nolan movie. So feel how you want to about that. And I was kind of curious to see it because I know he usually makes movies that are pretty interesting theater experiences, but maybe not necessarily like rewatchable, more or less. But I don't know if I liked it, and I might have hated it. I don't know. I'm gonna kind of have to wait and see how I feel, give it a little time, and I might have to rewatch it just because there were some things that I didn't super understand. But I think that was I think it's one of those things that kind of happens. My biggest issue with this movie, and I don't know if this was where I was seated or the fact that I saw an IMAX, I understood about half the dialogue. Half of it sounded like really muffled. The score was like way too loud, or the effects were really loud, and there's a lot of dialogue where people are like wearing masks and stuff. Really had a tough time kind of keeping up with that. So I wonder if there was some plot, explanation that I kind of missed. So I kind of had to piece together what I could. But I went with my dad, and I was like, "Did you have a really hard time understanding that dialogue?" And he's like, "Yeah, like I couldn't hear like anything." So I was kind of talking to people on the way out, and I was like, "Hey, did you guys have problems like hearing the dialogue?" And the one guy's like, "Yeah, I was just saying, I wish there was like subtitles or something because that was really difficult to understand." So I don't know if it would be different not seeing it in IMAX. Honestly, this is not really a good movie to see in IMAX. There's maybe 3 sequences throughout the movie that are actually like IMAX worthy. Yeah, if I were to see it again, I definitely would not see it in IMAX. Or at least I would sit somewhere where, I don't know, maybe the sound is a little bit better. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't want to dig too much into the plot. So I guess I'll kind of keep this kind of surfacey. But I would say the first third of this movie is atrocious. Like, yeah, it just, the opening scene just felt so rushed. And again, that was one where I couldn't understand half the dialogue. The rest of like the first act of the movie, I was like, I'm gonna hate this whole thing. Like, it's gonna be terrible. Just, I guess the issue in the first chunk was it was a lot of that sort of thing that Joseph Gordon-Levitt does in Inception, where he just kind of exists to explain the plot to Leonardo DiCaprio. It was kind of that, but it was even way more on the nose, it seemed like, because like it was the main character. There was a really weird sort of like through line of they would kind of ask the main guy who doesn't really, I don't think he has a name, I think he's just the protagonist. They would like ask the protagonist, they'd be like, "Oh, are you familiar with this thing?" And you'd be like, "Oh, yes," and then just explain what the thing was. Yeah, the person wouldn't ask you if you like needed to know what it was if they didn't know themselves. It was just clearly just telling the audience like information you needed to know that wasn't obvious throughout the movie. And that happens about 4 or 5 times. And then it gets to a point where Robert Pattinson, who by the way is like, I love and is probably the best part of this movie. I mean, in terms of performances, just because he's a really cool guy. I don't know. But anyway, they're having a conversation, and Robert Pattinson said something along the lines of kind of talking about a paradox, and then kind of explains what the paradox is, and then the protagonist is kind of like, "Oh, so what's the answer?" And Robert Pattinson's like, "Nothing, it's a paradox." And he's kind of like, "Oh, what is that?" And it's like, you knew everything happening, like all the events going on in the world up to that point, because you were just like this super insightful guy, and all of a sudden you're like, what's a paradox? And it just, that part was really like kind of infuriating. So that was really frustrating. Also, none of the performance was really interesting. I realized that you don't really know anything about the main character, and I don't know if that's by design, but if so, why would you do that? And if not, write a better movie, I guess. None of the characters were really interesting. I didn't really care about the, like, there's kind of like a couple in the movie, and I just could not have been less invested in them. It's just, it was really frustrating to watch, and I would say that the first third was like really bad. The second act was like a little kind of, gets a little bit of momentum, and then the final act is like, I don't know if it's good, but at least it made me glad that I was in theaters, because I was like, oh, this is interesting. I would say that it was kind of surreal. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing for Christopher Nolan movies, where he seems to like really kind of baby the audience a lot, at least like in his more like recent films. I guess not really Dunkirk, that's a little bit different, but maybe it's for movies like this, because there's a lot of things I didn't really pick up on, and it all kind of tied together in the third act. But again, I think I'm going to have to kind of wait and see what, see if I can watch it again and see if I can actually hear the dialogue this time. The actual kind of like thing that propels the movie, which if you saw the movie, or if you saw the trailer, you probably picked up on, is there's like some weird like time travel-y stuff, which in like the first half of the movie kind of just seems like reverse engineered, where it's like, oh, how can we make a movie around time travel? And then the last third kind of redeems itself, because it turns into more of a means to explore like the protagonist, which I thought was at least a good way to sort of redeem the movie, which I don't think it was a coincidence that the third act was like the best part. In the first half, it just kind of seemed like a lot of sort of explanation of like how this technology works, and it was also frustrating because it would be like, here's all this technology, how does it work? And then the main character would be like, what about this? And they're like, oh, I don't know, we don't know anything about this, we just found it. It was kind of like, okay, well, that was stupid. But yeah, that also didn't really work in the first half of the movie. The whole time travel-y thing just really kind of was laughable. Oh my gosh. There's a sequence where he's talking to like this scientist lady, and it was just terrible. And I guess that was probably like the low point of the movie, and then after that it like kind of was up and down. But I don't really have a ton to say. I guess it's probably, if I had to give it a rating, like a 5 out of 10. Like I said, the last act of the movie redeemed the movie quite a bit, but I can't really get over how much I hated the beginning. And just the characters were so like bland and uninteresting, and the time travel thing didn't really like it was really pointless, and it was way too much of the focus of the movie, I thought, until maybe like halfway through like the second act or the beginning of the third act, which is, like I said, when things kind of picked up. But other than that, I hope everyone is doing well. Have you seen this movie? If so, good for you, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, hopefully we'll have another video up for you guys relatively soon. Alright, thanks guys.